Coach Greg Coplen, welcome to the Running Effect podcast. How are you doing this afternoon?
Great, man. Thanks for having me.
Let's just dive right into the thick of things. I know you're a man of much wisdom, so I'm not going to throw you a softball to start out. I want to talk about growth and the evolution of programs because something I hear a lot of, and I was a part of a very mediocre high school team who made this excuse, was that you can't flip a program around in a year. You certainly last year, I think, flipped that notion on its head. I know the school that you coached at, the girls had not been ranked in the top 10 in the state in over 15 years. In your first year there, if I'm not mistaken, they finished third in the state of Colorado and 27th in the country. What's
Yeah.
your take on that notion that, you can't have immediate impact or change?
Well, I think you can have immediate impact. I think you can have immediate change. I will say last year surprised me a little bit. I knew walking in, and I should say, I'd had one track season with the kids leading into cross country. And so I think that, that was a huge benefit, right? Is that I kind of had late January through really cross country with those kids. And, so walking in, I knew pretty quickly, like, hey, there's some talented kids here. Now you don't know a whole lot about what their work ethic is going to be. You don't know how tough they're going to be mentally, and but you could tell right away that, man, there's some talent. And I'd known some of these kids because they'd been like in a youth program that I'd run even when I was coaching at my old school. And so I think the relationships just right away became really good and strong. I think the kids trusted me right away, and I think that's a big benefit, right? Like you've heard probably growing up, you have to trust the process. And I think that the kids on the team truly begin to trust the process very quickly. And I think when you believe in what you're doing, that's going to have a huge impact. That the kids stayed very healthy. We didn't have any injuries. It was kind of one of those scenarios like, man, this came together about as perfectly as possible to almost where I'm looking at year two coaching cross country of going, okay, last year went great. What's going to go wrong this year now? But I think belief in me, belief in each other, talent, but they had a great work ethic, and they just ended up being incredibly mentally strong. But I'll tell you one thing that just really stands out is every one of those girls on that team, they ran better together than they would ever run apart. Like what they did for each other, I think really set the foundation for where we ended last season.
Specifically in high school, I think just physiologically, it's a time where you're constantly improving almost, or it's very hard to not progress every single year. Of course, there are exceptions. Obviously, having a large high school listening base, I think it's important to stress this point in relation to your team last year that if you go into each day with the mindset of, I'm going to get 1% better every single day, from June to December, you're going to be not just an entirely different runner, but an entirely different person as a result. Could you speak on that mindset of, even kids listening today, maybe they have goals in December and that's great, but focus on what you can do today and how you can maximize yourself this day?
Sure, and I agree with your statement for sure. I think that again, and I'll just use last year's team as an example for that. We knew kind of coming out of the summer training that we had something pretty special. I knew that we were going to be much better than probably anybody outside of the program thought we would be. But even starting the season off, we had some really good performances that moved us into the top 10. In the state ranking wise, we beat some pretty solid teams in those first few weeks. But we're also in Colorado, and you've got teams like Mountain Vista and Air Academy. I mean, teams that finished top three in the country last year. But you've also then got teams like Fossil Ridge and Cherry Creek that are, I mean, I think both of those ended up top 25 or 30 in the country last year. And so those two teams, they kind of handed it to us early in the year, but the girls saw like, hey, we think we can get there, and I think really when we started racing in September, especially that mindset of just, hey, 1% better, 1% better. And Colorado's a small enough state that you're generally going to be racing against the majority of those teams every time we race, like we see most of those teams. And so it was hey, be a little bit closer this time, a little bit closer this time. And so they could actually see it taking place, to where it was like, oh my gosh, like they beat us in team average by this the first week. We've closed it to this. And then by the time we got to regionals, I think Cherry Creek beat us by 1 or 2 points. And then when we got to the state meet, we ended up getting Cherry Creek. Fossil Ridge was only like 13 points ahead of us. And then when we finished the season at Nike Southwest, then we were able to get both of those teams. And so that was really cool, is the girls could actually see the evidence of that 1% better, like it was taking place right before their eyes.
You mentioned how, in your words, you kind of got it handed to you early September. Obviously, we know
Yep.
the results and how the season ends up going. I feel like specifically in high school, kids really struggle with having an optimistic perspective, even of something like they have a bad workout and they're like, "Oh, season's
Yeah.
over." How do you keep that positive belief in your athletes throughout the season, whether it's a bad race or even a bad workout or bad night of sleep, and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I don't know how today's run will go."
Yeah, I mean, I had one of those yesterday, even as a coach. It was, 95 degrees, and we're out, trying to get this like kind of tempo effort in, and half the team handled it really well and half the team just blew up, and I'm out there even as a coach going, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm the worst coach on the face of the earth. I never should have had him do this, and then you drive away and you kind of look back and you're like, man, it was just a workout, but I think especially for high school kids, because they're not just feeling that when it comes to running. They may be feeling that in the classroom, they may be feeling that in relationships, like it's they've got a lot coming at them, right? And so the thing that you even just spoke about, man, was like even just a bad night of sleep, um, absolutely. And especially for a high school kid, man, those things add up, and so I think a lot of times they're coming to practice and it is a 95-degree day. They know they're doing these tempo repeats. Maybe they did have a bad night of sleep, and hey, maybe they forgot to fill up their water bottle throughout the day, and maybe they didn't eat quite as good as they were supposed to, and maybe they've got some drama in their friend group or whatever. And I think there's a lot of things that can impact one workout, and so I do think as a coach, then when I see a workout like that take place, is to be able to sit down with the kid and say, okay, tell me what your day looked like. Did you fill up your water bottle throughout the day? Tell me what your nutrition looked like, and also just like, man, tell me what your mental state even was coming into this day. You knew it was hot, you knew it was a tough workout. Like, did you kind of defeat yourself before we even started this thing? And I think that's an easy thing to do, but then at the same time, it's like, but if we can have success, 4 out of 5 workouts, or 7 out of 8 workouts, whatever that is, over time, right? It's maybe we got 2% better, rather than 1% better from one day to day stretch, and it's just like yesterday, was a tough day for a lot of our kids. And then I think yesterday was also a day where several of our kids kind of figured out like, man, I can push through some tough conditions, tough workouts. We're still very early in the season. We're not even to September. We've got our first race on Saturday. And so again, hey, if we can have success 4 out of every 5 workouts, I still think we're on that 1% better, per day, improvement plan.
To those listening, whether they're in cross country, high school, college, or training for a fall marathon, I think I'm assuming most of the principles you would speak to kind of apply to all those sectors. What's like one piece of advice you would give to kids listening out there who really want to maximize their upcoming cross country or race season?
Sure. Well, I think one thing we talked about was at the very beginning of this, of trusting the process, and so if you're a kid on a high school team right now, um, trust the process, trust your coach, trust your team. Don't try to go rogue, don't try to do this on your own. Stick with the plan. It's, if you're listening to this right now and man, maybe you had one of those days where like the workout went terribly, is, I what I tell my kids a lot of times is take 30 minutes to be a little bit pissed off about a bad workout, or be a little bit pissed off about a bad race. Take 30 minutes and be upset about it. But then after 30 minutes, there's nothing you can do about the race or the workout except for prepare for the next one. And so I think it's when it comes to racing or workouts, have a short memory. And I would say the same from a successful workout, right? Like, have a short memory of how great a race or how great a workout went, because at the end of the day, we got to prepare for tomorrow. I talked with our kids early in this season about, like, hey guys, you're coming off the best season in Chaparral school history, right? And you've set a foundation for what you want to go after now. But at the end of the day, last season is last season, okay? And if we want to go after these goals, then we've got to have a short memory about what happened last year or even yesterday, and we've just got to prepare ourselves for what is coming tomorrow. And again, I think on the same thing, those who might be training for a marathon, the older crowd right now that might be listening to this is, again, if you're training for a marathon, there's about a 99% chance you're following a plan. Stick with the plan. The plan was written, for a certain reason and with a certain, end game, in mind. And so, as a coach, I've gotten ahead of the plan. As, somebody who has done marathons through the years, I've gotten ahead of the plan. And generally, when I get ahead of the plan, things do not go well for me, or things do not go well for the kids I coach.
Something you were talking about there that I love was, the aspect of focusing on this year's goals and not residing in the past last year too much. Came across this quote last year that I absolutely love that I think speaks to that super eloquently. And the quote was, "The past is a place of reference, not a place of residence." And I think it's perfect, using
Nice.
the past, referencing it to inform, your current decision today, but not residing in it. And I think that's something so many people do, both from the perspective of failure or success. If they had a really successful season, that's all they're thinking about, and it's prohibiting them from positive action in the moment. Or I think more commonly, you had a bad workout, right? And then you have a second bad workout because your mind is stuck in, I just had a bad workout. What are some ways in which you try to help your athletes to be where their feet are, focus on the present, maybe reference the past, but don't reside there?
Sure. Well, and that's a great quote on either side, whether things were great or whether things were bad. And I mean, that's a quote far beyond just running and training. That's for sure. Because we can do that in lots of different aspects of life. I think with the kids, you, quite honestly, we talk about that a lot. We do quite a bit of time where our kids are, maybe laying down on the ground with their eyes closed. And I'm taking them through some visualization exercises, not just about running, but about life. And one thing that I say every time we do that are, what are some things in your life that need to be let go of so that you can move forward? Not just about training or racing. And quite honestly, we're really not speaking about that much. Like, I mean, I'll take time with the kids to say, hey, what's a relationship in your life where you need to maybe offer some forgiveness to somebody that you have not? I talk to them about the word resentment, and kind of use the quote. They say that resentment is like drinking poison and then waiting for the other person to die. And so I talk to them about, this idea of when we're carrying a lot of resentment in our lives, it's really tough for us to move forward in life because we're holding on to these past mistakes, whether they're our mistakes or somebody else's mistakes. And so when we talk about kind of, taking care of what you can today so that you're making a better tomorrow for yourself, I would say 90% of the time I'm probably not talking to them about running, in the midst of that. I do think that, our, whatever you want to call it, healthy, victorious running, reaching your potential as a runner and as an athlete. I think that a lot of things have to be right in our lives for that to truly happen. I think it's really hard to be really good at what you do if you don't also have a lot of other things foundationally that are setting the stage for that. So yeah, when we talk about, kind of letting go of the past, say 90% of the time, we're talking about things other than running.
Oh, absolutely love that. And good on you for focusing on that because I think so few coaches do. Not to continue to quote drop there, but even as you were talking there, I was reminded of a quote that is so similar to what you're preaching there in terms of resentment. The quote is, "If my hands are fully occupied in holding on to something, I can neither give nor receive." And I think visualizing that, what that actually looks like, is so true. For you in your career as a coach, when did it shift from merely coaching athletes to state championships, making national meets, and the practicals of threshold pace and how many miles per week, to more of a holistic approach of, I get these athletes for, 4 years. If I'm lucky, I can make an impact on their life. Let's focus a little more off the track, off the grass as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think coming into coaching, because I kind of got into coaching a little later in life. I mean, I was late 30s by the time I started coaching like high school teams. I'd done some individual coaching, of people training for marathons or whatever. But coaching high school kids and teams, that came a little bit later in life, and so I think I probably came into it maybe a little more from the foundation of, look, I don't know how good of a high school coach I'm going to be in terms of what kind of success we're going to have, but what I do know, just based on kind of what I do just with the rest of my life, I knew that I wanted to have a positive impact on kids' lives, and so I think for me it was really coming in with a, man, I've got an opportunity, to really play a role in helping develop a kid, the habits they have, the way they see the world, the way they treat other people. I've really got an opportunity as a coach to help prepare them for the rest of their lives, out of my own story, kind of knowing the high school experience that I'd had, that had been a lot of really good things, but then getting into alcoholism and addiction pretty early in life for me, and watching everything I'd kind of tried to build up in my life just completely disappear. What I knew is that I wanted to be somebody who, could help a kid if they were struggling with something like that, but then again, as I got into the coaching piece and knowing that I wanted that to be the foundation, you figure out quickly that, especially when you coach in Colorado, is, but you also better learn to be pretty good at what you do. If you want to have success here, then you better know what you are doing from the coaching side. You better know, when to schedule workouts, how to schedule workouts. You better know, how to talk to kids about, hey, how are we going to go about reaching your personal potential? Because that's what we're after here. Okay. We're not comparing ourselves to those around us. What we're trying to do is get the absolute best out of yourself that we can. And to do that, it's going to take this type of training, and it's also going to be that, I get to see you, 90 minutes to 2 hours a day. So what you do with the other 22 to 22 and a half hours of the day is probably more important if you're really serious about reaching your potential. And then I think you get a bunch of kids that are really serious about reaching their potential, and you get them all together, then all of a sudden some really special things can happen. So I think coming in to, I'd coached 1 year in Texas, and had with just a couple of kids that had some pretty decent success. Probably I was just coaching out of high school that had lost two coaches in 2 years. And so kind of there was just a couple of kids that, maybe I kind of helped bring back from just a really low place, just to, hey, how are we going to finish this, and so I think that even that year there was a little bit of a confidence boost that, hey, Greg, you can do this, and you can help kids not just in life but also chase goals of, running collegiately, whatever that may look like for them. And so coming to Colorado and starting at Valor Christian High School, I mean, good gosh, we were a small team. There were like serious, my first summer practice, I think we had like 7 or 8 kids. I mean, that was guys and girls. And then I think we ended up, with like 15 or so on the team to start the year. And then I had a couple of assistant coaches that just kind of would walk through the hallways and grab anybody that wasn't doing a sport. So we at least ended up with some numbers, but I don't think any of the ones we grabbed from the hallways ever really ended up doing much competitively. But we had a good time that first year. But then at that point, it really became about looking at what some other programs were doing, like seeing that, man, to make this successful, I'm going to have to be a coach that's going to really commit to being with these kids 46 to 48 weeks out of the year, because that's what other successful coaches are doing here. So if I want them to show up, then I better show up. And I think just little by little, and I think that was a big thing. The kids saw that I was willing to do what I was asking them to do. That was a big thing. We started getting some individual success very early on, and then, one person having success led to two and then to three. And then after about 3 years, I think that's really what kind of the foundation building was. We qualified our first, girls team ever to go to state, and we went to state every year after that. And again, the girls as a team built more quickly than the guys. The guys were having individual success, but it was maybe putting all of that together a little bit of a slower process. I would say the guys were about a year or two behind the girls team in terms of the development. But again, I don't think much has changed in what my mindset has been is, look, guys, you're going to get 46 weeks out of me per year. Okay. If I'm going to be a head coach, then that's what I'm committing to. And I'm asking you to commit to the same thing. And so again, right, consistency and character, and just, we're going to walk through the good times, we're going to walk through the tough times, we're going to keep the mindset of 1% better, each day. We're going to stay away from things like comparison, and just all of those little things. I don't know that the message has ever really changed much. It's just the consistency of how I've tried to do things as a coach and what I've asked of the athletes. And then those athletes saying, hey, we're going to do the same thing.
Going back a minute ago to talking about the more holistic approach on your coaching, I can certainly say this, at least from my experience of having coaches growing up. With how much time you spend with your coach in your respective sport, specifically if you're like all in on running and you do cross country and track and field, which is year round, the person kind of becomes like a second father, second mother. And so I think their influence, not every kid is privileged to have really good parents. I think, a lot of times you're filling that role. I'm sure you've had kids who are passed on to you with parents who don't have the right mindset. And I read this thing last week, and I think it's absolutely fascinating. I've been chewing on it, and I think it's very accurate. This person wrote, one of the most common dynamics I see amongst high performance is this: parents want their child to do well. Parents encourage their child to do well by praising when they succeed and criticizing when they fail. The child learns that praise and admiration are contingent on succeeding. That lesson metastasizes through early adulthood into, I'm only worthy of love, acceptance, and belonging if I succeed. Now, powered by an internal feeling of insufficiency, this person is driven to achieve many things. They're prepared to outwork, outhustle, and outsuffer everyone else because they're not just running toward a life they want, they're running away from a life they fear. Success and progress ameliorates the feelings of insufficiency. Therefore, success and progress become prioritized above anything else. How do you manage an athlete who comes into the sport with that kind of mindset?
Yeah.
Of
I
no
mean, you
fault
could.
of their own, just the parents.
You could probably end the podcast with that, what you just read. I mean, I think that that's a very true statement. And I don't think I actually don't think it's just with kids who may, have, for whatever reason, parents who weren't available, parents who had their own stuff they were dealing with, and so it comes out in the way that they parent. I mean, again, we were talking about this before we started. My wife and I have raised three kids, and sometimes in life I feel like I've been a better coach than a parent. Sometimes in life I feel like I've been a better parent than a coach, and so I think that, one, I like to believe that we're all just doing the best that we can with what we've got. That may not be a true statement, but I like to believe it is. Um, but one thing that, and again, we talked about the visualization earlier. And so another thing that I take the kids through, we had a goal setting session about a week or two ago. We're in a really quiet place. I'm walking through the kids through some goal setting, and then we went into our visualization time. And what we spent about 5 minutes on, what I told the kids in this time is, listen, no matter how fast you may ever get, no matter how much success you may ever have, in the sport, you know, it doesn't define your self-worth. It doesn't define your identity. It doesn't define your significance. If you go win a state championship, you have no, or you should have no more worth or significance in your life than you did if you blew up at the state meet, you know? But I think in that quote, what you read spoke to that a lot, though, right? Like, if we succeed and if we can get attention, if we can, we feel like we have more worth. We feel like we have more significance. And I don't think that's just a middle school or high school thing. I mean, that can happen to me as a 50-year-old husband or coach or dad. We all can struggle with the self-worth and identity and significance piece. I don't know that social media makes that any easier to deal with. I think that the world that you grew up in middle school and high school is far different than the world that I grew up in. Accolades and attention were really if your name got mentioned in the newspaper or maybe in the announcements at school. Now it's like you can go onto Instagram, man, and just find anything you want to about any runner. You can look at the success of anybody at any cross country meet or track meet on any given weekend. And so the accolades that kids are getting and the attention from those accolades, um, man, those can be pretty addictive, I would imagine. And so I don't know that that helps a kid who struggles with issue of self-worth or significance, being dictated by success or failure. But at the same time, it is the world we live in now. So we better figure out how to, walk through this because I don't think it's changing. Um, but again, the consistency of the message that I'm giving as a coach better match what I truly believe in, you know? And so if I'm talking to the kids about worth and significance not being found in, success or fast times or whatever, well, then as a coach, my attention towards a kid and my attitudes and behavior towards a kid, it probably better be consistent whether they're experiencing success or failure as well. And I promise you, I've not always succeeded in that. I want to succeed, um, and I think that I do a fairly good job at that. I can tell you that a place where I don't know if this is struggling as a coach, or if this is just, hey, this is how I see things, so this is how I should do things. But where I struggle with high school kids and really continuing to devote time into their lives, if I see a high school kid that's not willing to put work in each day, if I see a kid who's not willing to be a good teammate, and their success is far more important to them than the success of their team. If that attitude doesn't change, then probably little by little, I think you see that relationship do this. Um, Now again, I want kids to like we've got to give them time, right? If they're not accustomed to a great work ethic, and if they're not accustomed to their team and their teammates' success being just as important to them as their own, we've got to give them time, right, to walk down that lane and learn how to make that important. But I do think there comes a time where it's like, guys, we're either going to figure this out or we're not. And I think that's a place where, as a coach, I'm still trying to figure out whether, man, do I just continue to build in and continue to give them as much time and attention as anybody else on the team? Or at some point, do you have to say, hey, there's going to be a day that you're going to have to figure this out, but you're not right now. And because of that, um, I've got to kind of give my time and attention to those who are willing to figure this out. And I think that's a tough road to walk as a coach.
You mentioned a minute ago how you grew up in a very different era than, your kids you coach are growing up in today. If you could go back to those high school, college years that you grew up in, is there one aspect of society then or something you experienced that we no longer experience in society today that you still wish we did or you wish your athletes could go through?
Yes and no, because I think that the kids do still experience some, depending on kind of what their high school looks like. What where they grew up even looks like. So I grew up small town in Texas, one high school, one middle school. You had parades on Fourth of July that the football team would march down the the road in the parade, and the high school band, and so much of how I grew up, the town really revolved around high school athletics. And obviously, being from Texas, revolved a lot around high school football. Um, but but the town just really supported these kids and these teams. And I mean, the town was that I grew up in was 15,000. I mean, we'd have 5,000 people at a Friday night football game. One third of the town was there, and so I think that those kids grew up with this just true sense of like they were a part of a much bigger community, and I think that the way I grew up, you wanted to represent your town and your high school well. um, and and I don't know that kids get to experience that as much now. um, and so I do, where I coach now, at Chaparral. I mean, we're in Parker, Colorado. We're one of three or four, 4A or 5A high schools in Parker. And then we're right next to Lone Tree and Highlands Ranch. And there's another 4 to 5, 5A high schools right there. And so I think rather than, kind of, town community pride, you're representing just your high school. And so something that was really cool when I came to Chaparral, we've got it coming up again, is like homecoming is a really big deal. And so, like, they do like a homecoming parade, like through the community around Chaparral, and all the teams, all the, extracurriculars, just whatever. They all have these floats. And I mean, like, people from over the neighborhood are just turned out. I mean, the sidewalks just packed. And that was something really cool because when I coached at Valor, private Christian high school, we had kids from, I mean, you might have kids that were driving 60 miles a day just to get to high school. And I think that, I mean, how incredible that they would want to go to a high school, that badly, that they would put that kind of energy and effort in. But I also think that it was tougher to maybe have community spirit at times within that, just because you had kids from all over the place. And so it's like if it's a Tuesday night basketball game, kids that live 60 miles away, they're not going home and then coming back for a basketball game. So there might just not be a whole lot of people at a game. And so I think that sometimes that was something I wish that maybe kids could have experienced a little more, the way that I had experienced growing up. I miss some of the small town vibe, and some of what came with that. Where I coach now, I think you've got more of the community vibe, but you've still got four high schools representing one small city. But I miss just the community vibe and kind of everybody knowing everybody where I grew up. But at the same time, I think that probably still exists in smaller towns, where you're not close to a city. So
Something in my own experience as well as in talking with others, or just the science of things in your adolescence, you're consistently, thinking about the future. And I see it very prevalent in high schoolers specifically, where they're thinking about college, even if it's not running in college, the independence that college brings, or their future job, or whatever it might be, moving out of their hometown, whatever it might be. But in talking with, people who have won Olympic medals, a lot of them have told me I would do anything to go back and be on a high school cross country or track and field team again. Something one of my greatest regrets in life is, maybe my greatest regret in life is not appreciating those four years as much as I should have, because I was constantly thinking down the line, down the line. Even freshman
yep.
year, I can't wait to be a junior, when yada yada yada. Is there anything you're doing to, as much as you can, try to tell your kids, hey, trust me on this. Enjoy it, because you are going to want to come back here one day and you'll never get these moments and experiences again. Even small, insignificant stuff like, the 30-minute bus ride to a race. Those are some of the best moments, but you don't realize it until years down the road.
Yeah, no, you are exactly right. And I think the longer I've been coaching, probably the more proactive I am about talking to the kids about those things, because you just see it over time as, and I've coached a lot of kids that have gone off to run at, the next level collegiately. Some of them have gone on to have great experiences, at the next level. Some of them have gone on to be like, man, this sucks. I don't, and part of it may just be their own relationship with running. You get to the next level and maybe it becomes a little more like a business. You're actually being paid to be there, and like you said, you're being paid to be there is kind of tied to your performance. And so if we go back and talk about performance and self-worth, and all of a sudden I'm not having very good performances, all of a sudden it's not even just my self-worth that's tied to that, it's my scholarship, it's my place on the team. And so I think with just kind of going through the years of seeing that some kids go off and have great college experiences, and some kids go off and they don't really have great collegiate competitive experiences. I think each year I'm probably a little more proactive about talking to the kids about just really the beauty of what they're a part of now, because you said it, man. I mean, it is every moment. Like I think for us the big thing is always the summer morning practices. You get into the school year and we're already rolling on that, and there's going to come this point, man, where you're just like, man, I just miss being with my team at 7:30 a.m. On a July morning, and then we'd finish practice and we'd go to Jamba Juice or Starbucks or what, and the community piece is the relationships of that is something that those kids always look back to. I think for me, it's always those summer practices. Um, and so I think as a coach, both on the relational end of that, what we were talking about, but also even on the competitive end of that. I think that for a long time, and I still do to an extent, my goal as a coach, for those who have college running aspirations, it's like, look, I want to get them through high school with as much success as possible, but with as little wear and tear on their bodies as possible. And so I think that as a coach, especially in the early years, I was probably always a little more conservative with their training, conservative with maybe even some of the things I was asking of them than maybe where I'm at now. Because I recognize that, again, I think we've got a handful of kids on the team right now that they all have college running aspirations, and as long as nothing goes wrong, there's going to be several of these kids that run at the next level. But you never quite know what kind of experience they're going to have, if they're going to continue to enjoy it the way that they are. I think even with what's going on with scholarship numbers and now walk-on numbers, some of the opportunities that used to be there for kids may not be there here in the next couple of years. And so I think that I've probably become a little more proactive, and listen, we're going to get every bit that we can out of you in a safe way. But hey, we may push some things a little more than I might have 5 years ago, because I want you to end your high school years going, I gave everything that I could to my team, to becoming better at what I do, to becoming a better teammate. And so I would say even in these last 2 years, I think I'm probably even right there with the kids, where I'm like, as a coach, I don't want to take this for granted. I don't want to take this specific team for granted, knowing that, oh, I might even have a better team next year. It's like, no, we're going to be in the moment with this team, and we're going to get as much as we can out of this season.
Speaking about two specific athletes that you had the privilege of coaching over the years, Cole Sprout and Ashley Jones, both have been on the podcast numerous times. I think Ashley once, Cole probably 4 or 5 times at this point.
Yeah.
Take me through coaching both of those athletes individually, what those years were like, and what it was like not to just see them develop as athletes, but as I know, absolutely remarkable people, one of a kind.
Incredible people. I'm having lunch with Cole and another kid I coach, Drew Costello, tomorrow. I had dinner with Ashley Jones about a week ago. And so I think one thing that stands out immediately has been the long term relationships with those kids. And again, I think that, looking back a few years down the road now after they graduated, I think that, those days probably do become a little more special the further you get away from them, and so I'm really excited about seeing Cole tomorrow. I haven't seen him this summer, and but I think that, coaching Cole, that was a brand new ball game for me, man. Like it would have been for most coaches. Cole was one of the most decorated high school athletes, not just in the state of Colorado, but quite honestly, in the country. He was a set, national record, national class records, as a sophomore and a junior. And so when he came in, I mean, one, you start kind of. I knew he came, to me after freshman year of high school, and so I'd known for months. I mean, they'd already registered, at Valor, and they were on their way, and so it was interesting because I would even watch him as a freshman when he was running elsewhere, and you're kind of watching, going, "Holy cow, man!" Like there's something to this kid, and then he comes into the program. We start our summer training, and you realize that there's not just something to the kid in terms of how they compete. There is something to the kid in how they prepare. That is the thing that stood out about Cole immediately, man, is that his preparation for every day was off the charts. And it only got better and better as he went through high school. And I would imagine it's probably continued to get better and better as he's been at Stanford. But that was something that, every warm up movement, every warm up drill, it all had purpose, every warm up and every cool down, it all had purpose, the repeats, the mileage, the moderate, the recovery, the everything had purpose. And he was one of those kids that he just, it's like, hey, what's the purpose of today? And how do I best go about accomplishing the purpose of this? And so, what was really fun with Cole was just seeing you talked about it near the beginning of this, is that in high school, for the most part, you just see improvement, from the beginning to the end. Now it's a little more common with the guys. Girls can be a little more up and down, depending on growth spurts and all that. But Cole was just one of these that, we just watch it. We say that improvement, success is never linear. With Cole, it almost was. I mean, every time that kid raced, every time he raced, uh, you just kind of knew what you were going to get. I think that he may have had what I would say one or two bad races in all of his high school career that I ever coached him. His consistency was off the charts. And I think that's because of his consistency day to day was off the charts, And so again, you put that kind of consistent effort, forth each and every day. I think your races are going to kind of, mirror that. But watching Cole, as I think there was a meet that I'll just use as the example. We'd go to Desert Twilight down in Arizona each year. And back then, Desert Twilight was in NXR, they were always on the same course. Like now, man, it's like different course every year, but it was about an hour south of Phoenix. I was on a course that was very open, very wide, a few rollers, but for the most part, it was just like we would go down to that meet each year, and I watched Cole go, sophomore year, 14:48, junior year, 14:32, senior year, 14:14. I think that was the year that Leo Dashbach out kicked him right at the end. But, it was just, Cole was always this kind of 15 to 20-second improvement from year to year to year. He did the same thing on the state course. And what I loved about those years is it was before super shoes. And so, I know that's kind of changed the game now. And so when you watched what Cole was doing his senior year, Nico Young was the same age as Cole. And so when you saw a handful of these kids doing what they were doing, you were like, man, this is like we haven't seen this before, and that was really awesome. But again, Cole's character, Cole's just ability to be a great teammate and friend, and just his coachability was off the charts. I mean, I struggled even sometimes as a coach. I'm like, man, how do you coach a kid, you know, this good with this much potential? And at the end of the day, it's probably even just like, just don't kill him and don't injure him, man. Just get him ready for what's next. And but Cole was just, he was an incredibly special kid to coach. Just the memories I have with him in high school are absolutely wonderful. I mean, just even as a coach, the things that I got to experience, as a coach, just because of the success he had, he gave me opportunities. And it was something that I mean, I'll just always have so much gratitude to Cole for, because there were meets I got to go to, places that I got to go to that if I wasn't coaching Cole, I never would have gone to. So I'm incredibly grateful just for the role he's even played in my own life. Um, Ashley
Uh,
Jones.
yeah.
Any other questions on Cole or?
No, go for Ashley.
Yeah, yeah. So Ashley Jones, that was a little bit of a different situation in that I'd known Ashley since she was fifth or sixth grade. We went to the same church. I worked at a church as a worship pastor directly across the street from Valor Christian High School, and Ashley and her family went there. I was friends with her parents, and so I'd known Ashley for years and just really had a relationship as probably more of just kind of mentor in her and her twin sister Sydney's lives. Now I'd been trying to get her to run since she was like in sixth grade. She was a soccer kid. And, so I was always trying to get her to come out for, cross country and track, and kind of had her convinced coming into her freshman year to come start summer training. Well, then that's when Ashley's accident happened, was right before the summer leading into her freshman year of high school. And so when that happened, obviously that just changes everything. And at that point, you're just, praying that, hey, is Ashley even going to be okay? And so, what was really special in those years after Ashley's accident, with both her and her twin sister Sydney, and quite honestly with her whole family, was just being able to walk with them and through kind of all of that. I mean, Ashley, everybody knows about Ashley's accident because it's very visible. She's missing her right arm, but a lot of people don't know that they lost their dad just 2 months before that. And just kind of the just chaos that went in with all of that. And so just getting to walk with her family through all of that was just incredibly meaningful to me. And so by the time that Ashley ended up coming out for track her junior year of high school, that relationship was already so well established and well built. I was going to be, close with her and her family, whether she had, ended up running or not. And so there was a lot of foundation to that relationship. And so the, yeah, I'll get emotional even saying it, but what that has meant to me now, to be able to watch what she has done, to be able to watch what she has achieved, and seeing the years that have led up to that. Oh my gosh, I mean, that's a privilege, right? Like, a privilege to get to be a part of that. Ashley, man, when she came in to track season, it was just like, I knew immediately, holy cow, I'm gonna have to like hold this girl back, because it's like day one, you come in, okay, well, how can I be the best? you know and so it's her first day at practice. We're literally doing these, there's this hill that we would go over to, that really was about a 4 minute uphill repeat, and so we would use it as a VO2 workout, kind of a 3K effort type day, run hard up the hill. Well, all these kids have been training all winter. I mean, these are experienced kids. And so, like, our top ones were going to be doing four of those that day, and so I think I told Ashley, hey, let's just try to get up the hill twice. And I mean, so like she takes off on her first one, and I mean, she's 50 meters ahead of everybody. And I mean, this was a team that was getting ready to finish eighth in the country, a girls team. And she's like out ahead of all of them. And I'm just watching this going, this is going to end very interestingly today. And, sure enough, I mean, she blew up hard and about died that day. But it gave me a real picture of who, what her heart was, and I'll always remember that day. And then, the other part of that is she ended up having to go off into the bushes to the bathroom. And so we laugh about that day all the time. But that was really a real picture of what I was going to see with Ashley. By the end of that track season, I think she'd worked herself down to maybe about a 5:30 mile low 2:2800. She was a part of our 4x800 state championship, just her first year of running. And then she would go on that next fall to be, I mean, really our very dependable number 5 runner on that team that finished eighth at NXN. And so Ashley was one of those as well. You pretty much knew what you were going to get from her every time she raced. And that was everything she had. What's really sucked for Ashley and Cole, because they both, graduated COVID. And so they both missed their senior track season. And that was a bummer because there was a 40-year-old state record in the 1600 that, I mean, it was Cole's for the taking, and he didn't get the opportunity to do it. We set a time trial up for him, and he ended up breaking it by like 4 seconds, but you'll never see it, And then he beat his own state record in the 3200 in like an individual time trial. I think by like 11 seconds, just like an 8:46, at altitude, just doing a time trial over COVID. And so I'm bummed that they missed, that senior season. I mean, I'm bummed for me, just as their coach. That was kind of a crappy way to have to kind of end their high school career.
Few final questions as we wrap up here today. I want to give some context to the Coach Coplen I'm talking with today. This could be a podcast in and of itself, I'm sure, and we can cover it more when I get you back on in the future. But what are some of the key moments throughout your life that have led up to the individual I'm speaking with today? Even your start in the sport, which you kind of briefly alluded to earlier, or moments completely off the track without a stopwatch that are making up the person I'm speaking with today.
Sure. I mean, there's something pretty significant in my life that has kind of led to where we're at. So I was a kind of high school athlete, played anything and everything, but tennis was kind of my main sport. And was went off to play college tennis. Broke my hand really badly, and I'd already developed a pretty unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And kind of when my competitive tennis career came to an end, and just I'm already kind of going down this road that I didn't need to be going down. The wheels really fell off in my life. And so for really the next 13 years, it was very much, just kind of this winding road for me. And 13 years of just, kind of my alcoholism, dependence upon alcohol, just getting worse and worse and worse. Very thankful to this day that that God kept me alive through those years. That He still brought me a wife and allowed kids to come into my life. And but the chaos that was a part of my life in my 20s was something that was really it wasn't a good thing. It wasn't for me, it wasn't for my family. I actually found distance running in my 20s. But distance running was a very unhealthy relationship then, because I'd go out and just really beat the crap out of myself on the roads or the trails, and then it was like straight to the liquor store. And so it was just this, I was punishing myself no matter what. So I got sober when I was 31 years old. And when I got sober, that's when running really began to be this healthy kind of retreat for me. And I had kind of this new pursuit in life. And so just kind of year after year, it just became a greater and greater passion. Really in my early 30s, and just, you know, came to love something that had really never been a part of my life, for the first 31 years. And not just love it, but love it to, the point where, there's so many parallels, right, between distance running and just life in general. And I was getting to live out those parallels because my pursuit into distance running really matched my pursuit into recovery of a brand new life. And so, little by little, just as the passion for the sport grew, I all of a sudden started coaching, some other runners. I worked with youth, in the church a lot. The athletic director knew that. She asked if I would come out and start, coaching the kids, and that's kind of how this whole process started. It was like God had saved something for my life that I never knew I needed, and so, I was 37 years old when I really started coaching high school kids. I just turned 50 a couple of weeks ago, and I would say, apart from just raising a family and being married and just it's probably the greatest passion I have, and I think just the some of the successes that have come with it. Um, I don't take those things for granted. I think there's probably a lot of things in life when you look back at the first 31 years that, I probably took for granted. I took for granted the way I was raised, where I was raised, a lot of different things. These coaching years, I don't take these things for granted because I know how easily, one, it could be taken away if I ever decided to return to my old life and the habits that went with it. And two, I recognize that the the opportunity I have to lead and build into these kids' lives today is I am trying to be an individual in these kids' lives that maybe can keep these kids from ever going down the road that I ended up going down. We all make our own decisions, we all have our own directions. But I do believe that part of my purpose, a large part of my purpose as a coach, is to help establish a foundation for a kid that we started this conversation off with. And a lot of the reason for my addiction, the reason I chased alcohol is because I didn't understand that whole significance and worth not being found in how I performed, in what my success was. And so a big piece of my coaching is like, listen, we're going to help these kids learn early on that their self-worth and significance is not going to be wrapped up in this. So I would say that, I mean, that's a huge piece of who I am and why I am today.
Coach, final serious question for you. For those listening who have listened to this conversation all the way through, what would be the final takeaway message that you want to leave with people today coming out of this conversation?
I would say this, regardless of whether you're a, high school runner, high school athlete, high school musician, whether you're a middle-aged, distance runner listening to this, whether you're a coach listening to this, r- the relationships that we form matter. You know, the way that we pursue these relationships matter. Um, keep a short account. Keep a short account as a coach. Keep a short account as an athlete. um, the relationship is always going to be more important than what we do on the trails, what we do on the track. Um, as a coach, I wish that I could look back at 12 years of my life and see just perfect relationships all the way through because you always look back and you have fond memories in some sort of aspect for every kid. Um, but it just sometimes we go these different ways, and at the end of the day that's all right, because we all pursue our different things. But at the end of the day, as a coach, um man, I better value the relationships with these kids over anything else, and quite honestly even their parents and families, um because that's the value in all this. Again, I said it earlier, I'm going to have lunch with two of my former athletes tomorrow. I hung out with quite a few of my former athletes over this past summer. And all of those things have taken place because of a foundation of relationship. And if the relationship's not there, then I just don't think the joy in what we do is going to be there.
So good. Such a good note to lead people off on. One final question for you. The question I ask every single guest on every single episode on a lighter note. If you had Gordon Ramsay coming over to your house for dinner, what would you choose to make for him?
Oh, dude. Well, if I had the time, I'd have to set aside the time, but I would be out on the back patio for 10 hours doing a brisket on the smoker. And it's a real
Okay.
wood smoker, not an electric smoker. It's a real wood smoker. And I'd do a Texas style brisket with some Texas style pinto beans and cream corn and about anything unhealthy that I could find. That's what we'd be preparing. And if it was a Saturday here in a couple of weeks, I'd have college football going on the whole day. That would be a perfect day and a perfect meal with somebody like Gordon Ramsay. So
I love it. Coach Copeland,
what
really
would
appreciate the
but
conversation.
what would you do? What if Gordon Ramsay was coming over?
I'm
Have
not
you
I'm
answered
not
that
gonna I'm
question?
not gonna steal your flowers there. That is I can tell you I'm not gonna be on a back patio smoking brisket for 10 hours, so,
All right,
I'll give
man.
you your flowers there. I'll probably, like, I don't know, stir fry or one of my fancier. I feel, embarrassed after that answer. I can make homemade pasta and homemade meatballs, which are pretty good. Maybe
Okay, nice.
that.
And
I don't know.
yeah. When did you
We'll see.
graduate from high school?
2023, last spring. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I couldn't cook anything a year after
I
high
can
school.
I can
So
cook, but it's like I got like 5 staples, that are like
yeah,
on the daily rotation.
yeah,
Rice, you can cook chicken or beef, vegetables. We'll stick with your brisket answer. Coach, really appreciate the
yeah.
conversation. Thank you so much for the hour of your time providing so much wisdom and insights, but more specifically the ripple down effect you've had within this sport. I've been affected from your tree. Even like Ashley and Cole have impacted me, and I know they are in big part the people they are today because of you and the influence you had on them. So keep it up. Keep up the amazing sport or the amazing work you're doing, not just in the sport, but in the lives of your athletes. So thank you so much for the conversation. And I'm sure I'll get you back on soon, chopping it up.
Awesome. Thanks, brother.